you guys can turn to Hebrews. We're going to be looking in Hebrews, if you guys would turn your Bibles there. And we're going to look at chapter 12. And I really believe this section is showing, it's teaching us about endurance in our faith. And so that's what I want to talk about, an enduring faith. And, you know, our times right now, especially in America, I think, endurance has been lacking. It's on the decline. Endurance, especially in faith, is not something that's as common anymore. I was reading a study, I think it was a Pew survey. It said that for the first time ever, this was done in 2015, for the first time ever, Protestants do not make up the majority of our country anymore. It's down to 48%. It was 53% in 2007 and 62% in 72. So it's on the decline. People are leaving the faith. People who are growing are leaving the faith at increasing numbers. Endurance is being lost, and it can happen to anyone. When I was in college, I worked a summer job at a call center. And I was at a desk, and this lady who worked to me, you know, I'd talk to her every once in a while, and she was just one of the meanest, most cynical, crass people to be around. And I was just like, man, was not happy to be sitting next to this woman. And I come to find out, just through talking and conversation, that she used to be a Christian. And I was like, what? Like, this lady, there's no way. But she used to be a Christian, and she said she actually used to be the leader of women's ministry at her church, and she used to speak at conferences and do all these things. And she was telling me, I was like, well, you know, like what happened? Because she was just anti-God now, just completely like, you know. And so I asked her what happened, and she said, you know, years ago her husband had passed away. And she went through, you know, a grief journey with that, and a year or two later, she ended up getting remarried, but quickly she got divorced after that, and through those things, in a period of 3-5 years, she completely said, well, there's no way that a God could be loving and still let me go through these things, and so she completely turned away, and now just completely, you know, and that kind of thing is common. Trials and pressures and circumstances, they put pressure on us and our faith, and test our faith, and that's where, you know, we need endurance in our faith. And so that's really what I want to talk about today. So I'm just going to read the first two verses here of Hebrews 12. If you guys would follow along with me, it says, "Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." And so what the author of Hebrews is doing here, he's setting a picture of a race. And in Greek and Roman culture, these athletic games were a huge part, kind of like they are today in their culture. And they had, you know, those big stadiums, and all these people would come, and these people would compete race and strength and these endurance tests. And so that's the picture that he's setting for this talk and endurance, and he's relating that to our faith. And you know, if any of you guys have ever done much running before, I've done a little bit, not a whole lot, but I used to run. And if you start running for longer distances, there comes a point when you're running when they call it like hitting the wall, right? And everything in you says, nope, I can't do it. My couch is great. Why am I hurting? And I can't breathe. I could be on my couch watching TV. Why the heck am I here? You know, what am I doing? And so that's what happens in our mind, and we're running. And so that's kind of the picture here in Hebrews, is what's happening is he's picturing our faith, our life of faith, our walk with God as a race. And they're like hitting this point of hitting the wall. The trials and pressures and things outward and inward are coming, and they're hitting the wall, and they're wanting to give up. And he's saying, no, don't give up. Endure in the faith, continue on. And I think there's two senses. Before we look into this a little more, I think there's two senses of what he's talking about when he's saying to run with endurance and not to lose heart, not to fall back. And the senses are first, kind of the more obvious one, in that, completely leaving the faith, giving up, leaving the faith, walking away. And that's the first sense. He says, we need endurance. We need endurance in the faith, not to do that. But I think there's a second sense that can happen, and it's kind of like, okay, you're running, you're running the marathon or whatever it is, and you hit that wall, and those temptations, you want to quit. You want to, you just want to walk out and leave the race. But maybe you decide, okay, I'll just walk. I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to walk the race. You're giving up. You're giving up in the race, but you're not completely out of the race. You're just giving up. You're not trying anymore. You're not fighting. You're not striving anymore. I think that's the second sense that he's talking about with not losing faith and keeping endurance. That he's saying, stay in the race. Don't give up. And I think that can be another thing, like trials. We can go. This pressure. I can't keep focused on God. I can't keep my prayer life and focusing and walking with Him. I'm just going to give up. Distance. It's a distance of God. He's out here. He's not completely wiped away, but he's just distant now. And I'm going to look at my life, and it's too hard and too much going on, and I'm going to put God back here in distance. So I think those are the two senses that he's encouraging us in here with endurance. And so. What I want to do, and what I see here are a lot of things, but I want to look at four kind of keys to endurance from the text here. So four keys to endurance, and so the first one I'll look at is that it's a team effort. And so if you look at verse 1, it says, "Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses," we're surrounded by these witnesses. So who are these witnesses? Well, you guys know chapter 11, right? It's the famous Hall of Faith. And it goes through, by faith, Abel and Moses and Abraham and all of these heroes of our faith. They had trials, and they overcame them by faith, and they conquered and came out on the other side with victory. And so all these people. And so he's saying, since we have all these people, we have all these examples, now you also endure in the faith, like they did. They are your examples. You also endure. And what's interesting is they actually had we have an advantage over them. If you look back in your Bible to Hebrews 11:39, it says, "And all these having obtained," it's talking about the Hall of Faith, all these men having obtained good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise. So they still, even though they were commended for their faith, they didn't receive the promise that was given. What was that promise? Ultimately, that was Jesus, His first coming and His second coming, looking at both. But that promise is Jesus. They didn't, these Old Testament people, they didn't have Jesus yet. But they still endured in the faith. Now he's saying, and you look down in Hebrews 12 here, later it's going to talk about how Jesus is the author and finisher of our faith. And so we have Jesus to look back to, the perfecter, the finisher of our faith. They didn't have that. They were looking ahead. They had the Messiah promised, but they didn't have Him yet. We have Him. How much more should we be people of enduring faith, having Jesus as our perfecter of our faith? And so we have these Old Testament examples. And so there's a couple things I think that means for us here, that being a team effort in our faith. Our culture today is very individualistic in America and a lot of the world. But back then, especially in the writing of this, it wasn't like that. They had very much a sense of family and country and community. That was first, and there wasn't much a sense of individual. And there's good things and bad things with both, but it's different. And so having that sense of team effort in the community was so essential. But I think we've kind of lost that idea a little bit. But we really need each other in endurance and examples. I did wrestling in high school, which is, an individual sport. You're competing, just against one person. It's on you. But you have a team, right? And you practice as a team. And one thing I found it's much easier to work out and train and practice with a team of people than it is on your own. I mean, I tried during the summer and sometimes to work out on my own, and I would do it, but man, when you have your friends and your coach and you're all encouraging each other and you're working and you're training, it's so much easier, and you just get a much better training with a group of people. And that's kind of the idea. We have this great cloud of witnesses, this great examples around us. And so I think there's a couple things we can bring for that. First, that we have the Old Testament examples of faith, right? So when we're going through discouragement or trials or pressures, we have all these Old Testament examples. Read the Old Testament and Joseph, how, he had so many trials and things, but he endured and through the faith. That's an encouragement. We have all these examples, and reading the Old Testament can be such an encouragement in our faith by their examples. And, we also have people around us here in a church, Pastor Jerry and man, David Payne's story last week, that really spoke to me, that how he went through those trials and endured. And I'm sure, so many people have a story of that. We have so many people around us that we can go to. And I think, really it's pride that says, I don't want to go to other people. We do that sometimes. We're like, I'm just going to keep my problems, my trials to myself, and I'm going to deal with them myself. But really, that's pride. It's not like humility, because, and I think it's ironic that when we're at our place of our most weakest, we can be most prideful. I know, at least with me, I've found that, like, when I'm like, man, I'm weak and I can't do this, but no, I got it. Don't help me. Don't help me. I got this. I'm going to do it. And like you're struggling and making a fool of yourself. You can't do it. But no, don't help me. And we just, I think sometimes we need to let that go and go to other people. Say, hey, man, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. I can't do, I need help. And that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. We need to, sometimes just go to each other and lay down our pride. Back in Hebrews 10 earlier, it says, Hebrews 10:24 and 10:20 to 25, it says, "And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." And so, that's the encouragement here, is that we have each other. We need to be encouraging, seeking each other out in encouragement, but also encouraging each other. Maybe you're not in that place of trial, and you've had, you're strong in the faith right now. We could be seeking out others to encourage. Maybe you never know what the person next to you is going through, and sometimes just an asking or an encouraging word and seeking that out, I think really can go a long way. And so that's the first idea I see here. Next is this idea of laying aside weights and sins. It says, look next. It says, "Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race set before us." And so laying aside weights and sins. There's an obvious analogy with running there, that if you have like a backpack, even of like 10 pounds, right? The weight of like a small baby. You have a 10-pound backpack, and you are just going to be seriously hindered if you try to run a race. You're not going to be able to run as fast. I mean, that's obvious, right? And that's the idea, that we're taking these weights and we're taking these sins off. And I think there's first, the sins, right? Those are obvious ones of, lying, stealing, and cheating, and lust, and all these sins, right? Those are the first, and I think those really hinder us by condemnation. I think is one of the biggest things, that when we go through sin, we know it, and that's condemnation, and that seriously hinders our endurance and our faith. When I was at the college, I interned for a year after graduating, and part of my job as an intern was to counsel different students, and I'd work with students and help them. A lot of them were going through different sins, and I'd give them accountability and be working on them with that. And one of the biggest things I saw is I'm working with someone, and they're struggling with something, and I'm helping them. And through one of our talks, unrelated to that, they're saying, I'm just really struggling with my faith. Like, I'm doubting, I'm going through doubts, and I'm talking with them. But it was like they were blinded. They couldn't see that their struggle with sin was connected to their struggle with faith. And I think that's a big connection. When we're in sin in some way, it directly affects our endurance and our faith. So we need to be laying aside those things. But there's another sense. It says, let us lay aside every weight. Every weight. And the idea with that is anything that could hinder us is kind of the picture. Anything that can hinder you from running the race with endurance. And it's kind of the idea of the good versus the best, right? We all kind of know that good is the enemy of the best. And if we just settle for things that's good, and what happens when we're settling for something that's good, what's going on is we're saying, well, what's wrong with it? I catch myself saying that, like the what's wrong with it trap. But okay, well, there's nothing really wrong. I mean, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, right? But the question, we should put it in the positive. Does it help me? Does it help me run the race? Does it hinder me? Not what's wrong with it, but does it help me to move forward? And then that's when we say, well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't really help me. Maybe it does hinder me a little bit, and it's clouding my mind. I'm not able to think of God more clearly. I mean, and things. I mean, your TV shows and movies and music and whatever it is for you. It has to be a decision that you make between the Lord. But maybe it's something that's filling your mind, and you can't think of God clearly, or it's angry, and so now you realize you're angry more, and like, well, I'm listening to this angry, hateful music, or and things like that. I don't know what it is for you, but I think that's something we should be thinking of. Well, does it hinder me, rather than does it? What's wrong with it? So I think that's really the question here. And so these things we're taking off. We're to be putting off these sins and these weights, and that helps us to run the race with endurance. And so I want to look at a third point here. And this really is the climax, I think, of it. Look at verse 2, Hebrews 12:2. It says, "Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." And so my third idea here is looking to Jesus. Okay, looking to Jesus. Forgetting all else, but looking to Him. The word looking here has the idea of fixing our eyes continuously. It's not just a look or a glance. It's a fixing. It's a strong word. Fixing your eyes on Him continuously. It's not just a one-time look. It's a continuous look. It makes me think of. I was thinking of someone stranded at sea, maybe, and they're stranded on like a little boat or something, and you're just barely surviving with food and things, and then all of a sudden you see land, or you see a boat, someone coming, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, you are just going to be like, boom, you're going to, jump in the water, swim, I don't care, everything. And that's the interesting thing I'm thinking of, when you're so focused on that thing, I'm not going to be thinking, okay, I'm in my boat, and there's the boat out here that's come to save me. And I got my backpack that I've been carrying with me. It's got maybe a little bit of food and a water bottle or something. I'm not going to be thinking, man, this has been helping me a long time. I think I want to keep this when I jump in the water. And I got these boots that have been protecting me. I think I'm going to keep them on while I jump in the water, because they've just been a real, I can't leave my boots back to get to this. No, you're just going to be taking everything off, right? And jumping and getting to that boat as fast as you can, right? Because that boat, you are so fixed on it, and it's so precious and so valuable because you need it to survive, right? And that's the idea here with Jesus, that when we are so fixed on Him, that He is so precious and so valuable, and we need Him to survive, that these weights, these sins, it's going to come off anyway. It's going to come off because we're so focused on Him, we're running to Him, and that's the picture here. The example of Peter is a famous example, and on the water. When Jesus was walking on the water and He calls Peter out, Peter steps out in faith, and he's walking in the water, and he has his eyes on Jesus, and then he looks at the waves, right, and he sinks, and that's the idea. Our eyes are to be off our trials, our circumstances, the inward, and even the sins. The sins we're to be laying off, but that's not what we're to be looking to. We're not to be looking to the sins that we're fighting against, these weights. Our eyes aren't ultimately to be on that. It's ultimately to be on Jesus. That's the picture. And even, we have these great examples around us, and the great examples in the Old Testament, and the people, but Jesus is our highest example. And that's why we're to be looking to him higher than these, right? Because people are going to fail us. And even though they have great examples, if we're looking to them as like, man, this person, I need this person, ultimately they're gonna fail us. They might, something might happen. And so if we're looking to Jesus, though, we have our eyes on him, he's never gonna fail us. He's the author and perfecter of our faith. He's the perfect example of faith. And so we look to him, and he is what helps us through these trials. He is the one who gives us endurance, looking to him. Another example, if you guys would look back in chapter 11, one of the examples of faith that we're given is Moses here. It's in 11:24, Hebrews 11:24, and it says, "By faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin." So it's first saying, Moses, he was refusing to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So rather than he had the opportunity to associate with the Egyptians or associate with the Hebrews. The Hebrews are slaves and they're persecuted. And so he could say, well, I'm Pharaoh's grandson. Like, I can chill back here in the palace. I got all these, things available to me in the palace. He could have done that and said, that's who I am. I'm an Egyptian. I'm Hebrew. I'm Pharaoh's grandson. I got all these privileges. But he chose to suffer with the Hebrews. He chose to be associated with them and suffer persecution. Why? Look at verse 26. It says, "Esteeming the reproach of Christ as greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward." And when I read that, I was studying this, I read that, I was just like, boom, in my mind. Like, oh man, that was just like, man, he esteemed the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. And I think this is just so powerful. The idea is that when he had the option, right? He had the option to either, when these trials, these pressures are coming, he had the option to either suffer and endure or take the easy way out. Suffer and endure or take the easy way out. And he chose to suffer and endure because he believed that suffering, that endurance, though hard, was greater value, was greater worth than the easy way out. And that's the question, I think, that it brings to us. Do we count when we're hitting the wall and those trials, those pressures are coming, and we're like, man, there's an easy way out here. I can kind of give up. I could give up, right? And whatever that may be, whatever giving up may be, going to what comforts us. The fleeting pleasures of Egypt, it said for Moses. But that could be anything for us. I don't know. It could be obvious sins of alcohol and drugs and things. It could be other things, that we have an addiction to, or just we go for comfort, or whatever it is that takes the place, and it's just the easy way out. It's our comfort, and it eases the pain. Or we could say, no, I'm going to pray in this. I'm going to pray through this. I'm going to look to Jesus. I'm going to fight the fight. I'm going to endure in this faith. We have that choice, right? When pressures and trials come, we have that choice. And what caused Moses to go through is he counted that endurance, that though hard, that struggle, that faith as greater value. And that's what it is for us today, that when we go through those things, when we go through trials and hard times, and we endure with Jesus, that's value, that's precious, that's greater wealth. Jesus is our greater wealth, and we get more of him in that. And so that is greater value. That is our prize. It says Moses was looking to the reward, right? Looking to the reward. That was the reward of being with God, being with Jesus at the end, right? At the end of the race. This brings me to really my last point here, and it's one of encouragement. finally, and that's that we have a joy set before us. If you look back at verse 2 at the end, it says, Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. And so for the joy that was set before him, that joy was the presence of God, right? Being finally, it says that he sat down at the right hand of the throne of the God, right? That's a place of honor. And he gets presence with God. Look, back at Moses, right? It says that he esteemed the reproach of Christ greater riches than treasures of Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Right? So Moses' reward was presence with God. Jesus' reward is presence with God. And that's what it's saying. Our reward here is God's presence. We get to be with him. And so again, I think there's two senses for this. There's two ways that we can look at this reward and joy of being with God's presence. And that's first, that, finally in heaven, right? Finally in heaven, we get to be with God. If you look at Psalm 16:11, I don't have it written down, but basically it says that in your presence there's joy forever, there's pleasures forevermore, joy, great joy and pleasures forevermore, right? And that's the idea, that in God's presence there is fullness of joy. And that fullness is only going to be realized in heaven. And we have that to look forward to. And I think that's okay to look ahead to that and say that's where we're going. And that gives us strength. At the end of a race, or even during a race, you look and you can see the finish line. And I know, man, when I see the finish line, it's like, no matter how tired I am, I can just push through, right? Push through hard and go through that, seeing the finish line. We have a great finish line. And I think it's important to remember that there's fullness of joy. Just take that out of context for a second. Just say fullness of joy and pleasures forevermore. It's I'll take some of that. I'll have some fullness of joy. Can I have some of that, right? That's all the joy, all the pleasures forevermore at God, with God, in his presence. And that's what we have. And I think, heaven, we can sometimes say, well, it's going to be, it's going to be boring or whatever. We don't know what it's going to be like. But we have to know that he said it's pleasures forevermore. It's fullness of joy. And we have that. And so looking to that, I think that gives us strength, endurance in trials. But the second sense, again, is we get a taste of that partially now. We get to taste that now here, and it's just a taste. But man, when we endure, again, we're running this race, right? And we hit the wall. And whatever that is, that's trials outward. It could be loss, pain, suffering. It could be inward with guilt and grief and depression and anxiety, persecution. Whatever those trials is, we're running. We hit that wall, those trials, and again we have that option. And when we choose to endure, when we choose to say, no, I'm gonna hold on to Jesus. I'm gonna hold on to him. I'm gonna fix my eyes on him, and I'm gonna look through him in that instead of taking the easy way out. When we choose to do that, there's a taste of that joy. And it might not be immediate, but through it on the other side, there's a taste of that joy in his presence. His presence ministers to us and comforts us. And we get just a taste of what it's going to be like at the end. And that keeps us going. And that it's not, we fail. We give up sometimes and we fail. And, it's not the end. It's not the end of the race, but it's not the end of the world. But we don't, the consequences of that, we don't get that taste. We don't get that taste of joy. And if Jesus is the thing that we value and precious, like Moses said, it was his reproach was greater wealth than him. If that's the thing that we value and treasure and precious, then when we get to experience that presence, that is our reward. Because ultimately he is our prize at the end of the race. And that's the idea that at the race, Jesus is our prize. And when we endure, we get him at the end, but we also, when we endure, we get a taste of Jesus now. And so all these other things, they're all an aid to that. You know, our friends, our mentors, our people around us, our brothers and sisters, they are encouragements to us, but they're not the end, right? Jesus is the end. These encouragements, they help us run the race with endurance to get to Jesus. You know, the sins and snares and weights, those are things that hinder us from Jesus. And so when we're running the race, we lay off those things because we want to get to Jesus. And so He is our joy. He is our prize at the end of the race, and that's really what I wanted to encourage you guys with today. And so let's run the race. Let's have endurance because Jesus did, and because we get to be with Him. And let's encourage each other in that who are struggling, because we want to see them have the joy of Jesus' presence. So let's pray. Father, I just thank you that you have given us the opportunity to walk with you and to run the race with you, Lord. I thank you for Jesus, who came and was that perfecter of our faith, Lord. And I just pray that you would strengthen and encourage myself and this body of believers. I pray that you would just pour out your presence. You would minister, Lord. We want more of you, Jesus. And so I pray that you would fill us. You would speak to us. You would encourage us. Those who are weakened and fighting and hitting that wall, I pray that you would minister your presence and your power in their life, Lord, that you would speak to them. Lord, those who are not, I pray that you would give them continuing endurance and just the sense to look out and encourage others. Lord, I pray that we would come together in one body, Lord, running the race towards you, our prize, Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.